Greetings from Tokyo, I'm Trip, and welcome to the Hammer of Wrath. This week, you and I are going to paint Deathleaper. Let's go. Thanks for joining me in the studio. This week, you and I are going to paint Deathleaper, the brand new Tyranid character model. But first, an apology for the lateness of this video. I intended to have this done for mid-November, of course, but the flu had other ideas. Shortly after returning from vacation in late November with my family, I was struck with the influenza type A, which is apparently one of the most virulent and strongest strains that is circulating throughout the globe this year, and I have to tell you, it put me on my ass. Man, it hit different. On Sunday evening after returning from vacation, I started to feel a little bit strange, and an hour and a half later, I was in bed, shivering and shaking. Every inch of my body hurt, and it felt like my bones were made of glass. So, that's great. Now, of course, I live in Japan, so thankfully I have access to exceptional healthcare, and unlike America, where it's privatized, it won't bankrupt you here. The doctor prescribed medicines and bed rest, so I stopped at the pharmacy on the way home, picked up my inexpensive prescriptions, and went straight to bed. And that's where I stayed for 3.5 days. On the 4th day, I was back on my feet, but shaky like Bambi and sort of hobbling around the house as a shell of a human being, and it took me almost a week and a half to feel like myself. Now, as you can imagine, being laid out for a week and a half wreaked havoc with my schedule, and unfortunately this video, which was meant to be in mid-November, just didn't make it. But I figured it was best to finish it as quickly as possible, get it out so everyone could see it, and then move on to my next projects for December. So let me show you how I built and painted Deathleaper for my Tyranid army. Now, I had heard a lot about how difficult this kit was to put together, and some people even ranked it up there with Illuminator Xerath from the Necron line. The instructions don't look too bad, but there are a few parts here where the inexperienced modeler might stumble. So I just did the natural thing and avoided building it and started with the base. As a character model, it sort of has to have that very fancy, elaborate sculptural base, and this is this sort of fun bit of industrial wreckage. It went together really easily, and once I had it on the base, I went ahead and added some additional 3D printed parts from Epic Basing, last month's sponsor. And with that complete, there was no more avoiding it, and I set about building Deathleaper itself. Now, it wasn't nearly as tricky as I had feared. There are a few places where you need to be very specific about the order of parts as you put them together, and putting these skirts on is a little tricky in that you have to put on the leg first, and while your glue is still getting ready to set, applying some more to the tail, and then putting some on the underside of the leg, and then getting the piece in there, and then wedging it in, and making sure that it's in all the slots properly, and you've got to do that twice. And this is probably where most people struggled. Now, the rest of it went together without much of a problem, but there were a few fiddly talons here and there that needed to be added. The face was a bit tricky. These little tendrils, they're always a nightmare to clip out and clean off without breaking, but I'm going to keep the head separate for ease of painting and access to the chest and other areas. Now, before we move on to painting, I want to talk to you about this week's sponsor, Baron of Dice. Baron of Dice is your one-stop shop for dice for all your favorite games, not just 40K. Their hand-swirled and laser-etched resin dice ensure that there are zero mold lines, no balance issues, and no micro bubbles. They have dozens of different designs and color combinations to match your favorite factions. Head on over to baronofdice.com and enter the code THEHAMMER for a discount on your purchase. And be sure to tell them the Trip sent you. Once I have everything assembled, I'm just going to apply a white prime here through the airbrush. I know that my base colors are going to be lighter here, so I'm going to use a white for this, but on the base where I know I'm going to be using a lot of metallics, I'll apply a black prime because those metallic paints always look great over a black prime. Once I've got my prime down, I'm going to create a shadow pass or underspray everything using Steel Legion Drab from Games Workshop. And then once I've got that done, I'm going to do a top-down sort of zenithal spray with Ushabti Bone. Now what this does is sort of exaggerate the shapes of the model and give it greater form. Once that's set, I'm going to wash all the exoskeletal parts here, and this is just a 1-to-1 combination of Agrax Earthshade and Lamian Medium. Here I'm just using an older sable brush and I'm just applying it gently all over the exoskeleton, making sure it gets into all those organic shapes. Honestly, these types of models are where the washes really shine. It brings out your shadows, pulls away from the highlights all in one step. Once that's dry, I dry brush the entire model with a 1-to-1 combination of white and Ushabti bone. Then I moved on to the cape. Here I'm just applying 2 thin layers of Vallejo pale flesh. And once that's dry, I apply a wash. This is a 1-to-1 mix of Reikland flesh shade and Lamian medium. If you apply too much of the shade, gravity will bring it all to the bottom. It will pool up, it'll start to look messy and clog up the details in the model. So you want to apply this sparingly and move it around with the brush. I'm going to go ahead and let that dry. Then we're going to use the airbrush to apply a gradient of Druchii Violet over the abdomen and also anywhere a limb like a leg or arm meets the torso. This is one of the hallmarks of my army. We're also going to put some of that shading here along the tendrils. We want a really nice gradient as it comes away from the head. And once that's all set, one of the other hallmarks of my army is this sort of toxic green color. And I'm going to put that on the end of the feeder tendrils as well as the poison-tipped tail barbs. Finishing the model would be easier if it was glued to its base, so what we're going to do is switch over and start working on that. Here I'm doing an overbrush of my metallics. This is like a dry brush, only you're making sure that there's considerably more paint on the brush. And then a really fun trick, if you've seen my orcs video, I'm just using some orange gouache. Here it's another water-based paint, and I'm watering it down and just applying it around the model so it looks like rust. Once I put down my texture paste, I'm going to go ahead and apply a wash of Nuln oil, let that dry, and then dry brush all of my grays there to bring out the surface texture. Once I've completed that, I'll take some white through the airbrush, and here I'm going to start hitting all of these sort of alien growths that are on the base. Once I get my whites down, I'm going to go through and use that toxic green again. Here I'm giving these really creepy alien egg sacs an otherworldly glow, and then I'll go through with that Druchii Violet on a brush, just apply that to the vines or growth in between, and I'll move that out along the surface as well to sort of blend those things into the environment. Attaching the model to the base was actually one of the trickiest parts of the entire process. There are 2 of these tiny little tabs. The contact points are very small, and at first it just didn't take, but eventually I was able to get it. Once I let that fully set, I went ahead and started painting the carapace. Here I'm using Vallejo Black. It's a really great color that covers in a single coat. I then moved on to the purple edge highlighting. Here I'm just taking a fine brush, some of this purple, and working it along all the edges of the carapace. And once I've done that, here I'm taking that same purple, mixing in a considerable amount of white, and then just doing an even finer detailed brush along the edges of the carapace. Here we want a little more separation in between those strokes to give the idea of like a frayed edge to the plates. A final touch here, the scything talons on all of my creatures are black, so this is going to be no exception. We use the airbrush to create a really great gradient, especially along these kill claws at the top. And to finish the model, all we need to do is assemble the head. Turn around, over here. Well, there you have it, one apex predator for my growing hive fleet unending maw. I hope you enjoyed the video. It was my genuine pleasure to make and share it with you. If you'd like to support the channel, please like, comment, or subscribe. Drive us to the front page of YouTube and help us grow our audience. And of course, you can always join our Patreon, linked in the description below. Remember that joining at any level grants you access to our private Discord server, where a small but growing community of like-minded individuals helps each other become better hobbyists with honest and kind feedback every day. In fact, that community is the thing I'm most proud of about this channel. It has been a source of inspiration when my motivation has been lacking, and I've actually picked up a few techniques there from professional level modelers that are part of our community. And lastly, I want to mention our t-shirt shop, bakingsodatees.com, and I have a special announcement. Everything in the Shopify store is 30% off, as I wind that down and transition all the product over to the YouTube shop. So take advantage of the sale while it lasts. After that, you can always find the products linked in the shop below, which will be open at the end of the month. Well, thanks again for joining me, and I'll see you on the next one.